So the best part about sitting down to do a podcast with you is that you are never on the receiving end of these things. And you have made quite a career out of getting people to say all the things they don't want to say. And now here you are on the receiving end.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
Now you know how we feel. I'm not going to start with, here's how nice I am. I'm not going to start with, I'm going to ask you a question. Most people lie about the answer, and I want you to be honest.
Okay.
How are you? I'm not going to start there. But how are you?
How am I? I'm good. Interesting chapter of my life. It's an interesting chapter of my life, I think. Things feel more balanced than ever, if that makes sense. And when I say balanced, I don't mean in any equal proportion. I just mean quantities that make me feel good, right? And I feel like I'm in a bit of a boring phase of my life in an interesting way.
Define boring.
Just this kind of straight compounding phase of my life where nothing huge happens, but in fact, everything is happening. Because it's boring, it's the same, it's showing up every day, it's discipline.
Does boring mean routine, or does boring mean you're bored?
It means there's not a huge variance in the amount of experiences, but it's intentional.
So it's maintenance.
Yeah, focused.
That is counter to your personality. And what I mean by that is, you are sort of an entrepreneur's entrepreneur. You dropped out of school, went into business by yourself, sort of lived the entrepreneurial life. And entrepreneurs, their mentality, the don't do well, the creativity, the excitement, the joy, doesn't suit maintenance, which is why entrepreneurial-minded folks struggle in a corporate environment. Does that mean you're changing? Does that mean that you're in a position of no creativity? You're not feeling challenged? So bored is a very interesting choice of words.
Yeah. So I'll give you an example of something. Let me just take my podcasting business. It's about 30 people. It's called The Diary of a CEO. And everything is going up and to the right. So this month is our highest downloads ever. We're going to do about 35 million downloads this month, 400,000 new subscribers on YouTube this month, Spotify, everything's going up and to the right. Mm-hmm. And I know that it's in those moments, because I know this from, I'd say, 2.5 decades of observational analysis of my mother, of successful people, of Joe Rogan, of all the people that were big and then fell off. I know that it's in those moments when temptation to lose focus is the highest. Mm-hmm. So it's in those moments when everything is going great that you need to have this kind of boring patience with the process. And it's this slow, iterative, 1% finding of marginal gains that feels boring because I'm not accepting huge new opportunities that might divert my focus. I'm doing, in fact, what I think Joe Rogan did so well, which was do the same thing for 15 years. And don't allow yourself to be swayed by temptation, which is, as I said, optimal when things are going well.
Give me an example of a person or an organization that you believe gave into temptation. Like, what does that look like?
A specific name of a person?
I mean, or a company.
I can talk broadly about.
I mean, the point is like we're talking about these things 100%. In the abstract.
Yeah.
Help me understand a tangible example so that I can relate to what giving into temptation looks like.
The biggest YouTuber in our country, in the UK, had, let me say, 3 million subscribers. He was the king of YouTube. He was the king of in-depth conversations. He was the king of the algorithms, etc. He got so big that he got so many opportunities. He got an opportunity to start a fighting channel. He got the opportunity to start a gaming channel, a football channel, a second football channel, loads of other channels, a gambling channel. He took those opportunities. He got an opportunity to move to another platform called Twitch. He took that opportunity. He lost focus, and you slowly saw this descending of his ability to reach people, his message. He lost sight of also his authenticity and would take opportunities based on their lucrativeness, not the resonance that it had with him and his audience. And I just watched him go from being the king to being now completely, he texting me the other day and asking me for a loan because his whole team have left him. And I diagnosed that moment against someone like a Joe Rogan who doesn't get credit for really the consistency and staying power. And I go, it was in the moment when temptation was highest that he should have made the toughest decision, which was to focus. And I talk about that a little bit in my book, these moments in my life where I had such high temptation to lose focus. Or my mother, who I watched start 25 businesses between my age of 10 and 20. And I watched how she was never successful because whenever something showed any sign of success or failure, she would be swayed by a narrative that there's greener grass elsewhere. And watching your mother, like our family we were virtually bankrupt for my entire childhood. No birthdays, no Christmases, no driving licenses, living in a derelict house, purely because of my mother's lack of focus. Even the one business she started, which is this restaurant that went remotely well, she was immediately swayed by someone down the street telling her that an estate agent's business was better. And then I watched the restaurant crumble as she tried to give 50% to two things when both of her competitors in those industries are giving 110% to each. So when I said boring at the start of this, I'm honoring the fact that I know focus and focusing on consistency and compounding and doing more of the same stuff is in fact the path to the top. There's this really interesting boring section in the middle of it when you've got to just say no a lot. And they always say, you know, when you're unsuccessful and things aren't going well, say yes. And when you're really successful and things are going well, say no. I'm saying no to everything. And it can feel a bit boring.
I guess what you're describing in the example of the British podcaster is selling out, right?
Yeah.
Which is you've achieved a level of notoriety, or you have a number of followers that is now appealing to other companies and advertisers, et cetera, and you say they dangle money in front of you.
It's the focus, the selling of the focus that I think is the worst thing. You know, Charlie Munger, one of the greatest investors of all time, says, never interrupt compounding interest unless you absolutely have to. Like, that's one of the great rules of investing. Never interrupt the process when something is compounding. And he interrupted the process by shifting his focus.
Yeah.
And that's the chapter of my life I'm in, and it's difficult to speak to teams. In fact, your work on thinking about infinite games and finite games really helped me, because you've then got to build a system that is built for a long chapter of your life. Yeah. You've got to build a company culture, and you've got to energize your people and inspire them in a way which is built for 10 years, not 10 months. And that's what I think a lot about, is how do I keep these people with me for the next decade? How do I keep their enthusiasm up? How do I keep them in a sustainable culture?
Did you always know this? When did you learn this? When was the conversion to being finite driven, you know, hitting a number, hitting a score, if I get this amount of money, that'll make me happy, to now recognizing that sort of boring is actually a strategy?
So it was reading your book, in fact. So reading about finite and infinite games changed my first business in a quite profound way, because I realized that we were aiming at things like becoming the best in our industry. When we wanted to be number one, make the most revenue or whatever. And I realized that there was both a lack of fulfillment that would come with achieving those goals, but also it wouldn't stand our company the best chance of succeeding over time, because we were unsustainable. We were too intense. We were focused on short-sighted goals. We had short-sighted incentives. And then in 2019, I stood in front of my company and presented a new way forward, which I called www. Which was our world goals, which means outside of our walls, our welfare goals, which is the people inside of our walls, and I can't remember the third, world, welfare, and our work goals, which is the work we do for the clients that we have. And these goals were all infinite in design. And just because of that, it meant that we were designing our company to go for multi-decades. Motivation increased, staff attrition fell in terms of people quitting. Our incentive structures changed. Our client work changed. We took on different clients that could go with us over the long term, which were more lucrative. And that's kept with me ever since. So thank you.
Oh, I love that. And thanks for being an example of what an infinite-minded company looks like.
Yeah.
So there's a detail in your own growth and your own history as an entrepreneur that I find really interesting. I'll give an analogy. I've had people come up to me and say, can you help me? Can you give me advice? I want to be a public speaker. And I say, well, what do you want to talk about? And they go, I haven't figured that out yet. And you realize they've got it in the wrong order, which is you find yourself compelled by an idea, and then you figure out a way to spread that message, public speaking being one of them. It was always weird to me that somebody says, I want to be a public speaker, I don't know what to speak about. And I think we see that very often in business owners, which is, I want to make a lot of money, I want to be my own boss, I'm looking for a business I can start, right? And money very often is the driver. If I hit this number, I'll be happy. If I hit this number, I'll feel successful, be successful, whatever. And I'm very curious about your rise when you started your first business before you went public. What was the motivation? What was the drive? How old were you when you started that business?
I was 21 when I started that business. It was a pivot from a business that I started when I was 18, but 21 when it was founded, when it was registered as a company.
And what was the ambition? What was the drive?
There's it's multifaceted. So there's a personal drive, which is to become rich.
Yeah.
And that was very clear to me. I needed to become rich.
Why?
Because I was deeply insecure and riddled with shame and being pretty much the only black kid in an all-white area growing up. We were the weird family, in my view. As I said, we lived in a derelict house, and values often decided by comparison. So, if you look at where I was getting my value from, you've got a perfect house next to ours, a perfect family. On the other side, you have another perfect white family with lots of money next to ours. Then you have this derelict house with me and my black family inside of it, where the grass is 6 foot high. Everything about my context and my environment told me that I was lower value. It told me that I wasn't enough. So the things that invalidate you when you're a kid often become the things you seek validation from as an adult. And for me, I was invalidated by our lack of money, by no romantic interests, by my family being quite bizarre, my mother being particularly interesting. And that's what I wanted. I wanted normalcy. So at 18 years old, I write in the front page of my diary that by the age of 28, I'll make £1 million. A Range Rover Sport will be my first car. I'll get a 6-pack and a girlfriend. And that was my orientation and my North Star in life. That was, if I did all of these things, then I would be successful. And that's the path I set out to achieve. And by 23, I had a Range Rover Sport as my first car. I had multiple millions in the bank account, had a girlfriend, and I was working out. And, I didn't feel great. To say the least.
So 23 years old is a pretty young age, to be a millionaire, but then to have achieved one's goals on paper, and not feel successful. So what happened? So you achieved these things, and then what happened?
I realized that I'd been lied to by some kind of narrative. And when I say lied to, I don't mean someone had lied to me. A narrative had lied to me at some point along the way. A narrative had told me that upon our company going public that morning, when I went over to my phone in the corner of the room, that a marching band might appear, and maybe all of those people that called me the N-word or bullied me when I was a kid would appear and apologize and say how great I was or something. I was confused about the nature of fulfillment and who I was and why I wanted what I was, and I was riddled with fake ambitions. I think that's what I came to learn over the years, was that my ambitions were fake. They weren't ambition, they were insecurity. And there's a big distinction. And most of our lives are dragged by insecurity and shame. They're not driven by ambition. And when you it's a tragic truth that most of us are going to have our ambitions, and our narratives fail us before we realize that they're illusions and they're mirages and they're false. It's something that I think a lot about. How do we get people to realize that these limiting beliefs and ideas that are driving their lives are illusions before they have to undergo the pain to realize that themselves? Even a little bit earlier, when someone offered to buy our company for a very big 8-figure number, me going home and going on rightmove.com to look at the houses I could buy, then going on Auto Trader and look at the car that I could buy, and looking into the image on this screen and realizing that I would be somewhat emptier. I'd be somewhat poorer for buying these things. And I couldn't quite, it was an emptiness that I could feel inside of me. And then I met the guy that I wanted to become. I always think about this. I went and met the guy that I wanted to be. Friend of mine, was still a friend to this day, billionaire, 7 Lamborghinis outside of his house. I slept in the Louis Vuitton room, which was just this big room surrounded by these bags. Spent time with him that night till 5 a.m. and he opened up to me, and deeply, deeply lonely. Asked me to sleep in bed with him that night. This is a 35-year-old man, one of the most miserable people at a fundamental level that I'd met, and that is who I was striving to become. So I had to go in search of something else, a new set of values to govern my life.
Well, you said you described this as fake ambition.
Yeah.
So then what's real ambition? Because you did make the distinction. What's real ambition if this is the fake ambition?
Yeah, so real ambition is driven by your intrinsic desires and passions and interests. So, like I DJ now and I do this podcast. These are things that I would do irrespective of remuneration. They're attached to my intrinsic motivation.
The things that you would do for free?
You might not do them for free unless you're fortunate enough to have surplus income. But they're the things that, you would choose to do if in a world where you didn't have to worry about money. So fake ambitions are driven by the pursuit of rewards and validation. Like I wanted a Lamborghini and I wanted a Range Rover Sport, even though I'm not interested in cars. Real ambitions sound like I want to go and play the violin in the hills of Peru because I love the violin. It makes me feel great, And it's funny because I used to think that if I realized I was quote unquote enough, it would would remove my ambition. A lot of people think this. They think if they go, I've had, people like Gary Vaynerchuk and other people I've interviewed say that if they're scared to go to therapy because of what it might change in them, because of what it might remove. They think it will steal their ambition. It doesn't steal your ambition. It steals your fake ambitions, and it gives you enough space to focus on your real ones.
You have achieved a tremendous amount, and I think what I enjoy. What I really enjoy about spending time with you is, for somebody so young, you have a tremendous amount of perspective and wisdom. I'm getting older now, and I'm now that person who I remember older people would say to me, "But wait till you appreciate what the world is like when you're older," Mm-hmm. And I'm like that person now, looks back and be like, "Oh, I wish I knew that." Do you have a sense of what you still have to learn at this age looking forwards, or is that an unknown to you that you're going to have to trip over and fall on your face to find out?
So outside of parenthood, which I've come to realize that I'm not, it's one of those things that I realize I'm not going to know anything about until it happens. Mm-hmm. I would say romantic relationships, I still have a ton to learn there. Mm-hmm. I would say I'm still slightly confused and insecure as it relates to self-worth. I do spend too much time obsessing over metrics. Mm-hmm. And I know that there's still a fundamental link between my self-esteem and my self-worth and these metrics and numbers, which is interesting. I sat with someone who wrote the book about status or status. I don't know how you guys say it over here. And he says we all play status. Status? What did you say?
No, I'm just kidding.
I'm going to say status. We all play status games. Yeah. I was under the opinion that I'd stopped playing them. Mm-hmm. I'd sold all my fancy things. I didn't have designer stuff. Mm-hmm. So I assumed I'd stop playing status games in my life. And he made the case to me that your games just change. Mm-hmm. Billionaires, it's, when you don't have a lot of money, the logos are bigger. When you become a billionaire, it's smaller logos, but bigger yachts. Mm-hmm. People with cameras, they play, if my cameraman walked in now, he'd start talking about the cameras in this room. Mm-hmm. We all have these different games we're playing, and I'm playing a different set of games now, and I don't want to be a slave to the game. I want to be conscious of the things that I'm doing and making sure that I don't find myself in a similar position where I'm trading happiness for my self-worth. That's still an ongoing challenge I have. And then I have other challenges. Like I have a lot to learn about emotional regulation.
Tell me more.
I find it easy to get annoyed at things. I'm never angry. I don't shout. It's not my style. But I find it easy to go, specifically as it relates to work things. And you said this on stage. Do you remember when we spoke?
Yeah.
You said I get very, very annoyed at small details not being right as it relates to work and standards. And that's something that I know that I want to improve. I want to be able to take a little bit of a pause before reaction. You said you still harbor insecurities and have self-worth issues based on hitting metrics. Mm-hmm. Say more about that. Like where do you feel where does, if you're happy, you wake up every day with gratitude, and yet it seems paradoxical or oxymoronic that you still struggle with self-worth issues related to metrics. Yeah, I don't. It seems paradoxical, but it's not, because both are definitely true. So it's definitely true that I wake up every day with this deep sense of gratitude and disbelief at my life. It's every day. But at the same time, my obsession with being successful, making things better, finding marginal gains everywhere to the point that it frustrates me, and this obsession with climbing and being better feels like it's still rooted in the same old issues from my childhood. And it's just about it's about being conscious of that and having a healthy relationship with that pursuit. And again, it being driven and not dragged. Tell me
a project that you've been involved in professionally that you absolutely loved being a part of. It may or may not have been commercially successful, but if every project you ever worked on was like this one, you would be the happiest person alive. Something specific.
The Diary of a CEO, the podcast.
Okay, so what specifically about Diary of a CEO?
Yeah, the Japanese refer to it as your ikigai, right? Something that I think I can get good at. I believe it's helping other people. It's remunerative for me, and I enjoy the process. So it ticks all 4 boxes in that regard. It seems to be my ikigai, as the Japanese would say. And it's definitely the thing that I found in my life that checks all those boxes. A lot of my businesses, I know that I'm running them for commercial incentives. It's ticking a curiosity box, but it's really for a commercial means, an end. But the Diary of a CEO would be the one.
Is there a particular guest or episode or series of guests that that capture that feeling better than anybody else?
So many of them. Obviously, all of our ones. That third episode we had for me is a perfect example of that, where you have a human being. You get to meet a human being at that human being's essence. You get to learn things that are resonant and that make you feel like your struggle isn't because you're inadequate. It's because you're a human too, and you're given a path through your struggle. There's humor in there. There's a range of emotion in there. Those are my favorite things. And if I go right down to when I was a kid, I was strange. I would go on first dates and I would ask them deep questions about their childhood. If I had a tour guide and he was telling me, I remember being in Peru and the tour guide was showing me buildings. And for 7 days, I showed no interest. And on the 7th day, he started talking about how different cultures that he takes on the tours have different levels of happiness. And he had my undivided attention. And he said to me that on that 7th day, he says, you haven't paid attention for 6 days. And on the 7th day, when I started talking about people, you tuned in. It's just clearly in school. 2 lessons that I went to and didn't get expelled from were psychology and business. All the other lessons, my attendance hit 31%, and that's why they kicked me out. And I would steal those psychology books because I wanted to take them home and read them. So I've always had a focus on human beings and why they do what they do. And so this is just proven to be the perfect solution to that.
Tell me an early specific happy childhood memory, something I can relive with you.
Running around in the garden with my brothers, having a water gun fight.
Was that one water gun fight you're talking about, or something you did on a regular basis?
Just one particular one that I remember.
Okay, tell me about what of all the magical things, and I know you had a weird childhood, but of all the magical things that happened as a child, what is it about this one thing that you're choosing to tell me about it now?
Freedom of any worries. I just felt the sun on my body running around through the garden. Our house at this point wasn't dilapidated. My parents were still in reasonable terms with each other. And yeah, it was freedom. It was sunshine. I was away from school. I didn't really like school. It was freedom. And that freedom is something I've pursued my whole life, absolutely in an unrelenting way, where I do believe
you've done things where you played in the garden before. You did things where you played with your friends, where you had a sense of freedom. What was it about this one where you're playing with your brothers that
just seems to be perfect that day? I don't know why. It just seems like everything, there was ease. And there was so much dis-ease in my childhood. There was so much screaming and shouting. This particular day just seems to be very easy. Everything there was, everything was there. The sun was there. My family were there. They seemed to be happy. The house was fine. Wasn't any worry. And I was free. And that freedom is really why I'm an entrepreneur. I'm just not very good at being constrained in any way. I'm a remarkably good quitter. It's one of my greatest skills, is being better than everyone I know at quitting.
Say more about that.
I just think I'm a really, really good quitter. I reflect on my
Meaning
life.
you know the right time to quit, or you just quit too quickly, you quit too easily?
Know the right time to quit, but it's more sort of intuitive and instinctive than that. Quit with such ease and such little worry about the path forward or the path behind me. And yeah, that's really it. I think the real skill of quitting isn't necessarily knowing, because you can't know, but it's knowing that you can't tolerate the current situation. It's knowing that uncertainty is a better hand to have than misery.
But what about, there's a young generation now that quits very easily.
Yeah.
And they seem to be following your counsel, which is, this sucks. I could go talk to somebody, but they probably won't listen to me. So what would be what's the point of going to talk to somebody who, doesn't care about me anyway? I'm just going to, everything you're saying can be rationalized and used to justify quitting regularly to the point of too much and too easily.
Well, I think
where's the nuance?
I think the key point of difference is, I'm saying when you think about the fight to change something, you have to weigh up the rewards on offer. You don't lead a fight to change something in your job if the rewards on offer are still at the other end of that, a job that you absolutely hate, or if you think that all the effort it would take would still leave you with a job you hate. You fight for something when you believe that the fight is worthy of the eventual cause. And so if you're a Gen Z and you're 19 years old and you've got working conditions you don't like, but you believe it's possible, that change in this organization is achievable, and if you achieve that change, it wouldn't suck, then you fight for it. But I don't believe it's right to fight for something where you know that even if you win, the rewards aren't worth the fight. So that's kind of what I'm saying. And to be fair, what you're describing is Gen Zs who just don't like a situation, so they leave. And I believe it's the nuance as well as it relates to Gen Zs and working culture is when you're young, and I talk about this as well a little bit in my book, is you should really be focused on filling these first two buckets, which are your knowledge and skills, irrespective of, I believe, the resources, the reputation, and the network you get from the role. I think those are the most important things. I talk about these first 5 buckets in your life, knowledge being the first one, which is what you know, skills, which is what you can do, resources, which is what you have, the network, which is who you know, and your reputation, which is what the world thinks of you. It's really those first 2 buckets that are the most important, and it's all 5 buckets that are going to decide the course of your life. The example I give is of my friend in San Francisco was in his front porch, and a guy comes running towards him, sweating, and and saying he's building these rockets and putting these chips in people's brains. Then he runs off. And when my friend told me that, I was like, my first knee-jerk reaction was that is a psychopath that had escaped from an asylum. My friend said it was Elon Musk. And the minute you know that, it's because of Elon's reputation and all of that, those 5 buckets that he's paid into. The world is his oyster. And I think young people, what sometimes they'll do is they'll choose reputation, or they'll choose resources, which is money or remuneration in any regard, or they'll choose network, working with in a place that is surrounded by cool people, versus knowledge and skills. And I would implore all young people to focus on jobs that give them knowledge and skills. The 2 buckets that no one can ever take from you. No professional earthquake can empty those buckets.
Tell me some feedback that you got.
For example, the Diary of a CEO team, which is 30 people, we now have 360 interviews. Because I read things in an exit interview for a different company, and I had no idea that person felt that way. Why didn't I ask? I had absolutely no idea.
So is that why you built in the 360, so you can get that information before the exit?
And also trying to dissuade people to join the company before we interview them. You think of interviews as a place where you're selling yourself. Because of these exit interviews, and because I know that our culture is so clear and non-negotiable in many respects, I really try and dissuade people from joining at the very start now.
So what do you say?
I'm just very honest about the way that we work.
Which is?
And the expectations is we're a team that are absolutely sweat the small stuff in every regard. We work in the office. We have what we call freedom within parameters. So these are the parameters of our working environment. We're in on Mondays, we're in on Fridays, we're in most of the time, and then you're given freedom to make your own decisions. So if you're not in today, I have no idea where you are, no one's going to ask you. If you're not in for 3 days, I have no idea where you are, no one's going to ask you. You're totally trusted in that regard, but we need these parameters because we believe in synchronous collaborative work as well. And I laid out this manifesto to my teams, which I sent to them, basically saying that we're going to be in the office, but the key thing was explaining why, the underlying values and principles as to why we're in the office and how that links back to us achieving these big ambitions that we all want to win at. And in there it says you will do the best work of our lives sometimes in a coffee shop or on a beach, and we'll do some of it in the office. Hopefully it's a nuanced thing. And I'm really clear on that. My biggest thing in teams and company building is culture. Like, the older I've got in business, the more I've realized that my job is simply to hire the best people in the world and bind them with a culture that makes 1 + 1 = 3. And it's my obsession. I'm so obsessed with it, you wouldn't believe it. I'm absolutely obsessed with it, which is how to get a group of people to behave in a manner that is conducive with best outcomes. And that's also links to my obsession with psychology. And I write a lot about this in my book, and I've studied it a lot, and I've spoken to the best managers in the world at big sports teams and their players, and I've learned so much in this department.
I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm channeling my inner Stephen Bartlett.
Oh, listening.
I'm just sort of sitting here and letting you do your thing.
Yeah, that's my thing.
What I think is interesting, which is I think to tell somebody up front that we sweat the small stuff, right? What I'm curious about you as a leader, as you grow as a leader, especially when scale starts to show up, when you have, 30 people becomes 50 people, becomes 80 people, becomes 1,000 people, where you don't actually know everybody's name anymore, and you don't recognize everybody's face. You don't, you walk through a hall and you don't even know the people who work for you.
Yeah, I've been there.
I've seen you sweat the small stuff, and you and I are very, very different in how we sweat the small stuff. And I'm very curious do you know the impact on your team the way you sweat the small stuff? Like what ripple effects it has? I'm not criticizing sweating the small stuff. I think that's great.
In what regard?
Are they able to sweat the small stuff when you're sweating the small stuff for them?
Okay. So,
shall I give you a real life example?
Yeah.
It's the example. We talked about it a little bit, but when we did our charity show at the Royal Festival Hall, the mix on the music was all wrong. The music overshadowed our voices, which is the intro music before we came on. And I knew it, and you knew it. And we said to the team, that needs to be fixed. And you sat in the audience and kept pushing and kept pushing and kept pushing. And I was watching you sweat the small stuff. I don't know if you noticed, but I sort of like walked away. I went and did my own thing. And not because I thought, oh, Stephen's got this under control. It's because the way I do that is different. And my attitude is, and it's not right or wrong, and this is what I think is interesting, which is I sweat the small stuff by saying in no uncertain terms, this must be fixed before we go live. And then I expect them to fix it. Like, I've said my thing, it's a team of professionals know what they're doing, and then I leave it be. But I watched what happened, and I don't know if you know this, is because you were sweating the small stuff, it increased the level of stress. And the people who are professionals, who know exactly what they're doing, became vendors, moving a level up and moving a level down because you told them to, not because they said, I think I'm gonna try this and see if that works. They became order takers. And we got the product. But my question is, at what cost? And for one night, whatever, right? But when it's your own team, the question is that sustainable? And how does that make somebody feel over the course of time? When absolutely create a culture where you expect them to sweat the small stuff. And the analogy I'll give is a military analogy, where there's something called commander's intent, where the commander says, I want this accomplished, and then walks away. And it's up to the team to figure out how to get it done, and to get it done to the satisfaction of the commander. But the commander doesn't say, have you tried this? Do this. Now try this. Wait, that didn't work. Do this over here. Right? And what they're doing is building confidence and leaders in their wake versus order takers and creating an environment where confidence might actually not grow.
So that specific example is a good one. So I arrive in the hall.
Right.
We've got an hour to go.
Right.
Done multiple shows myself. The last one I did, there was real issues with sound and acoustics.
Yeah.
So that's on my mind.
Got it.
I sit down, they play it. Nobody seems to. This is my perspective.
Sure.
This is not my team.
Yep.
So I have no idea about their behaviors, whether I can say something to them and it will change instantly. I don't have that level of confidence. I've never met these people before. I hear it and there's a clear issue with the audio.
Yeah, it's bad.
And I know that the last time I let that slide, I then woke up in the morning to 27 messages across LinkedIn and Instagram of people really unhappy that had spent £70 to come to a show. That's front of mind for me, that LinkedIn message, that essay that girl sent me from Glasgow, who had travelled down from Glasgow to see this show. Then because of an audio issue we had, she sent me an essay telling me she had a bad time. That's weighing on my mind. So I communicate that I think it needs to be better. They play the new sound and I still think it's not good enough.
Correct.
It seems like some people around me think it's good enough.
Yeah.
It doesn't meet my standards yet.
Yeah.
So I say, it's not quite there. They play it again, it's not quite there. It again seems to me that people around me are okay with that standard. It's not okay for me.
Right.
For me, it has to be there. They play it again. It seems to me like some people around me would at that point say, that's good enough.
Yeah.
Not for me.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking about Rebecca, who sends me the LinkedIn message with the essay tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
When she comes out and she couldn't have heard it and she's traveled from another country. We had people coming from other countries. So my decision was, I will sit there, and I'm not telling these audio people to do because I ain't got a clue what they're doing. And I'll just say when I think that I can hear the audio clearly.
Yeah.
And eventually it got to a point where it was about 80%, and they said we'll continue to work on it. And then I walked away.
Yeah.
And that's how I am. I am. If you work with me, you'll know that there's a standard. And I've seen. You asked me the question: how does this impact the people around me? I genuinely believe that when you look at the podcast trailers that we have, you've told me you think they're the best.
Yeah.
And you've said to me as well that your team are trying to emulate them.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's we sit there sometimes on Sunday night till 2 a.m. tweaking 1 second. Because we that is both the controllable thing and it's the thing that most teams don't care about. They go to bed. they walk away.
For sure.
So it's my belief, and I say this a lot in the book, that fighting for the most used phrase in my office is 1%, because it's our religion. If we were to get hoodies, they would say 1% on the back of them. We believe that it's the small things that most people don't care about that are the things where the most accessible and important gains are made. So that's audio for me was one thing I could control. It was getting that right an hour before the show, and when we walked out, it was perfect.
It was. Do you want to know how I dealt with that situation? Because I dealt with it simultaneously with you. I was also very, very unsatisfied, and it had to be good for all the same reasons. I know people are traveling in, people are paying good money. I know it's a special event, and you and I have the same very high standard that we want people to walk away going, that was so worth money and 2 hours of my life. And I'm so, so glad I went. Like, I want them to feel that they got the better half of the deal every time. I went to the senior person there, the one whose reputation is on the line for putting this show on. And I leaned into them and said, this is not good. I said, this has to be better.
So I didn't know who they were.
Right.
I had no idea who any of these people were. So for me, I was like, I can't trust people that I've never, ever met professionally to deliver upon a standard. When I was like, the people that are coming are tagging me on Instagram. So that's the moment. And had I not had a show recently where there was an audio problem and there was a big backlash which I had to answer for, or if it was my team, when I turned to my team and I said, we have to get this right, if I'd said that to my team, I could have walked away.
So...
But if I say that to a team I've never met, I'm going to sit and make sure.
So I'll tell a story.
Yeah.
So I did this thing for the Disney Imagineers a bunch of years ago. And I was just giving a talk about why and start with why. And they wanted to see what it meant to start with why. And so I picked a random guy in the audience to do a why discovery with. And I picked somebody with gray hairs because I figured he'd had a little experience and kind of knew his thing. And unbeknownst to me, I found this out afterwards. The guy I picked, his nickname in the company, and I'm not even sure if he knew this, was Ice Chips, because he was a cold bastard, right? So I picked on Ice Chips, and I started asking him to give me a specific example of what it meant to be an Imagineer, like why it was so important. And he told this story over the course of many minutes. I'll give you the very quick version of a new ride that he had overseen the building of. And he went to see the opening of the ride. And at the opening, there was a guy in a wheelchair with his kid waiting to go on the ride. And he said, anywhere in the world, everyone would see a guy in a wheelchair with his son. Only at Disneyland do we only see a father and his son at Disneyland. We don't see, and we've made it, like you talk to people who are in wheelchairs, just how seamless and how easy Disneyland is. And his intensity is because it mattered so much to him that that person never felt like a guy in a wheelchair, that he only felt like a dad with his son at Disneyland. And we're all crying. And in an instant, everyone understood why he was such a cold bastard. It's because to him the stakes were that high. In an instant, those who worked for him, who 10 minutes before hated working for him, now loved working for him. In an instant, more people wanted to work on his team because they wanted to be held to that standard. And I think that people with high standards should obviously continue those high standards. But I think there's value in sharing a specific story of a specific person. Maybe it's a girl from Glasgow, or the converse, something affirmative, that helps people understand why you come in like a bull in a china shop, because it makes them want to support you. And I don't mean you, I mean a leader. And it makes them proud to lift the quality of their work and push harder for that 1%, rather than feel that no matter what they do, they can't do anything right. And I've been on your side. I've been the one who's come in and said, no, and I've sat there and pushed and pushed and pushed. And it was only until a lot later in my career that I learned that what I was doing is making somebody feel that they can't do anything right. And I appreciate you said it's different for folks on your team.
Yeah, because the reason when I was talking earlier about these exit interviews, you'll notice that I said I switched from the Diary of a CEO team, which is about 30 people, to saying another company's exit interview.
Yeah.
Because no one's ever left. And part of the reason that I think no one's ever left the Diary of a CEO team in the 4.5 years that since we started the company, no one's ever quit the company, is because we're so grounded in our sense of purpose to the point that every day we start with our impact chat, which is the screenshots or the messages we've received from people all around the world, or we watch a little clip of someone that's come up to us in the street and said about their darkest time and how what the work we're doing has been pivotal to them. The team all watch the episodes. We all spend an hour every week going through the most meaningful points of feedback we've had. Yeah. I feel this sense of responsibility. And when we're talking about, when I show the metrics to the team, which we did this week, it's all framed against impact. It's all framed against Joanna, who came up and told us about the loss of her son. And so, and it feels like this responsibility that we're holding as a unit together, which means that the work, and also, do you know when I talked about the trailers and stuff?
Yeah.
I said Saturday night 1 a.m.
Yeah.
One of my things is you sit in the trenches with people.
Yeah.
So if I'm asking Ant to make a correction last minute because one word in the trailer isn't quite hearable, I'm going to sit with Ant to 1 a.m. On Saturday night. I'm not going to tell Ant to make that edit and then go to bed or leave. So I will sit in the studio, even if I'm useless, just to show that we're doing this together. That's so important to me. And when we're thinking about that moment in the theatre at the charity event, there's part of that in it as well, which is there's the trust issues that I have because I don't know these people. There's this fear of Rebecca's going to send me the LinkedIn message and we're going to ruin her trip if she can't hear it.
Yeah.
And then there's this third point, which is I actually think I'd be more of an arsehole to say something and walk off.
The thing that I would appreciate about the way you've built the Diary of a CEO, the company, is how, and I think a lot of companies don't do this, which is you are very clear about what it's like to work here. And you're going to say, you're setting expectations up front. This is what it's going to be like. If you don't like that, please don't work here because this is what it looks. And it's a lot more sophisticated than we work hard, play hard, which is nonsense. I've never believed in that as an aside. That both of those sound very unhealthy. Working hard it's like work smart, play always, but that's an aside. And then the expectations are set. And if somebody doesn't like it, then they knew that up front. And I think that very often what happens when companies are interviewing, they're selling themselves just as the potential employee is selling themselves, and they make it out to be incredible and we have fun all the time and it's amazing and it's fun all the time and it's easy all the time. Well, that's not how any company is ever. And so what I love is the way you set expectations up front.
And do you know what as well?
And I love that. And then you simply say, I'm going to hold you to the standard that I told you about on day one, or day -1.
Do you know the most motivating thing I think for people in work is, and I've come to learn this, is progress.
Yeah.
And the reason why maybe Sophie, my assistant, who's been with me for 8 years, pretty much my whole career, hasn't left, is because she feels like she is on a rocket ship.
Yeah.
And when Harvard Business Review interviewed 1,500 employees and asked them what their best days in work were, it was always the days when they had a sense of progress.
Yeah.
And I know that progress comes from those 1% marginal gains. Sir David Brailsford, when I interviewed him, he talks about how making 1% gains improves your sales numbers or your performance on the bicycle in the Olympics or whatever. But the more important thing that no one understands, he said to me, is when you create the impression amongst a group of people that they are going somewhere, that they are moving. He says that was the thing that changed our fortunes when he became the head of performance at the Olympic cycling team and took them from being the worst cycling team of all time to the best ever and holding all the records. He said it was the sense of progress, this sense that we're going somewhere together that did it. Not the gains, the psychological sense of progress. And so we call it the progress principle, which is, I think I reflect on that and go, this is why I think if you spoke to the 30 people individually and said, is this, and we kind of do this in our 360 feedbacks now, is this the best job you've ever had? I think 95% of them would say yes, because we feel together collectively like we're going somewhere. And more importantly, it's somewhere we want to go, somewhere that matters.
And it's something other than money.
Yeah.
Because progress can be like, look at our growth. Because I think a lot of companies would
to do with that.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I just want to be. I'm just being clear for people that we're not talking simply about
hockey stick forward motion. And I think if you want to make people happy in work, they need challenge.
Yeah.
Right. This is why in game psychology, games get increasingly more difficult. You wouldn't do the same difficulty of crossword over and over again. You want a sense of challenge to keep you engaged. Daniel Pink, who I interviewed, talks about challenge being critical to motivation.
Yeah.
They need that sense of forward motion, which is the progress principle, that sense that we're going forward together. So you've got to keep people challenged, healthy amount of challenge, and it's different for everybody. We're all swimming at different depths already. So it's just that one step forward into that discomfort zone. You want to be working with a group of people that you genuinely believe care about you, which means that they care about you beyond the professional output. You want autonomy in your work. If you have a sense of control and freedom, which I believe that the people in my team do, although we have high standards and high expectations. And lastly, maybe most importantly of all, you want to believe that the place you're going is subjectively worthwhile. So for Holly and my team, if you asked her why she loves this job, it won't be the same as why Sophie loves it or why Will loves it. Totally different reasons, but they've all got a reason, and it's a worthwhile reason. And if you have those 5 things in your team members, I think it's hard to lose people that when you have all those 5 things going for you.
The thing that I think distinguishes you from other, not just young entrepreneurs and business people, is, there was this 80s, 90s model that was formed that perpetuated up until today about the hard-nosed, business leader who, believes in progress and growth, pushes people because we have high standards, and to some degree is always there's a lack of vulnerability because the vulnerability is weakness.
Yeah,
and you still represent a lot of the. You're successful, you're young, you have ambition, you're driven, you believe in very, very high standards, and yet you are very comfortable being very open about your struggles, your uncertainty, a crazy screwed up childhood, that you're very open about unresolved issues, struggles with relationships, feelings of inadequacy, still unhealthy connections to metrics to some degree that you're still working through, and you're very comfortable presenting yourself as a work in progress. Mm-hmm. I think that the message that you spread and the fact that you have been as successful as you are, as young as you are, I think, quite frankly, and I sort of pushed you on this a little bit at the beginning, I actually do think that you are leading a new movement of what the future of business and business leaders could look like and should look like. That the two are not mutually exclusive, that being a human being goes along simultaneously with commercial success. It's not either or, they go together. In fact, they're healthier together.
Yeah, and I just want the best outcome in my personal life, my mental health, and in my business. And it's my belief that high standards are non-negotiable if you want to be successful. And again, why does success matter? I've explained that in part, but I've explained why the success of the team also keeps people motivated. And in my personal life, if I want to be happy and successful in my personal life, then I also need to be open, and I need to be honest, and I need to be a human being, honest with myself first and foremost, which allows me to be honest with others, allows me to be open enough to have relationships with a woman who, can connect with me. So I hope that the byproduct, everything you've detailed there, is because I'm trying to be successful. I'm trying to be successful in myself and in my business. And by the way, I know saying that I have high standards in work is like, I know some people will think it's like a toxic thing or whatever. I'm like well aware of that. But I also have studied hundreds and hundreds of successful teams. I've interviewed 10 Manchester United players under Sir Alex Ferguson and the biggest CEOs in the world, all of them. And I know a couple of truths. I know that people do want to do the best work of their lives, the right type of person. Yeah. I know that there's no company or great team in the world that's ever got there without high standards and unnegotiable values.
The best companies in the world, the best leaders in the world, it's not that they just have high standards, which they do, but they make it abundantly clear the culture that you're walking into.
I've also ran the test. So I've got multiple companies that I have this bird's eye view on, and I see I see the companies that have high dissatisfaction that I'm an investor in.
Yeah.
I'm on the board, and I see it tends to be the case when there's lack of clarity, regardless.
Yeah.
Either way, if it's remote working or if it's in the office 5 days a week, the biggest disease is lack of clarity.
Yeah.
And then people can choose. And the worst company cultures in companies that I invest in are the ones where they have weak leadership in terms of giving clarity and setting expectations, regardless of what the expectations are or regardless of what the working dynamics are. And so with my thing in my companies, if I'm the CEO, if I'm driving the company, you're going to know. You're going to know exactly what's expected of you. You're going to know exactly what our cultural values are. And I'm going to defend it like no one has ever defended it that you've ever seen.
Yeah.
And if you speak to people that work for me, like the CEO of one of my companies called the company's called Flight Story, he will recite moments where I acted totally against the company's short-term objectives in a way he could not understand to defend our values and our culture of kindness.
Yeah.
Even though we needed this person and we're going to lose a client if we let this person go, me finding out that they did something to a junior member of the team, they spoke to them in such a way which I think is unacceptable, I removed them, which means we lose the client, fine. And I remember the conversation that day with Oliver saying, I'd rather not have a company with my name attached to it than allow that behavior to exist anywhere in any of these walls. It's a violation. And if we allow that violation, it's like a frog in a frying pan. It will slowly creep on you. It's like a disease. So this is why I said earlier on I'm obsessed with culture, because for me, I'm clear and it's unnegotiable. And we do the best work of our lives. We do great, great stuff. We really do. We outfail all of our competition, which is really the key to becoming successful, I think, especially in a world that's changing at lightning pace and is only increasing in pace of change.
What does that mean?
Like, so I remember reading about, I think it's Ray Kurzweil, he's the, eminent futurist in the world. And he says, because of the rate of change, if you're 11 years old now, you're going to experience a year's change if you're 10 years old now, you'll experience a year's change in 11 days by the age of 60. Ray Kurzweil says that we'll experience 20,000 years of change in the 21st century, which is 100 times more than the previous rate of change in the previous century. We're going into a world that's changing faster than ever, where books and typical sources of information aren't going to give you the answers. So how do you find the answers to key questions in podcasting, marketing, business, sales, processes when the world is changing so quickly? Well, you have to be failing faster than your competition. And that's a philosophical thing. It's a behavior thing. It's a culture thing. How do I get my team to outfail the competition? If we do, then we're going to arrive at the right answer continually faster than everybody else. So if I because podcasting is a good example, I can show you on my phone now the Diary of a CEO translated into every language in the world. A two-way conversation. So you're speaking in Simon Sinek's tone, but in Italian. I can show you that on my phone right now because we've done it. I can show you the tool we've built to A/B test 40 thumbnails at the same time before the episode comes out. And then when it comes out, it tests 8 every hour. And it's like, so I just appointed this week a head of experimentation. Brilliant. And I know that and it goes back to my obsession with these 1% games, I know we're going to fail our way faster to the right answers across the businesses that I run. And that's why I'm sure we'll be number one, because our rate of failure is significantly faster than every other team because of culture, dynamics, a lack of bureaucracy, empowerment, smaller teams, incentivizing the experiment, not the outcome of the experiment, conducting type 2 decisions faster than everybody else, decisions that are reversible, realizing that time is in fact usually the biggest cost in decision making, not the outcome, and that's the way we operate, and it's always worked for us. And I feel like in that regard I have a secret. I feel like I have a secret to business, which is most people are they're messing around and trying to make big steps forward. My obsessive belief is that it's the tiniest small steps forward that are discovered through failure and higher rates of experimentation that make all the difference.
And it's little because little failures are not a big deal. And I think people are so afraid of failure, but the problem is they're thinking of large steps, small, big decisions,
quick failures.
Small, quick things, constant improvement.
I over the years, I spent 10 years working in marketing, so I would sit in these boardrooms with CEOs, and there was this father and son. They run 2 different brands under the same company. I'm going to call it Dad's brand, Son's brand. Now, when I took an idea, there was this one moment where I figured out a loophole in Instagram where we could grow a following cheaper than anybody's ever grown it before. And I took it to the dad and the son. The dad, I present the idea to him. He's arguing about the cost. He's da-da-da-da-da. He wants evidence. 9 months of him deliberating whether to proceed with the idea. I take the idea to the son. The son would always say, he'd hear the idea, he'd say, Jenny, go and get Nikki and the entire team. Call them into the room and say, Steve, repeat what you just said to me. And I'd repeat the idea and he'd say, we're going to do it now. No contracts, no worry about the money, how much we're going to get paid. He says, we're going to do it now. And we'd conduct the experiment. And in that particular case, it gave them 13 million Instagram followers. Now, why do I say this story? This is not a one-off. This happened for 5 years with me working with the dad and the son, $2 billion companies. The the conclusion of the story is the son's business overtakes the dad's business and is now the biggest business in the space. The moral of the story is the son intuitively knew that the cost wasn't the 20K. The cost was time wasted, procrastination, and the missed opportunity. He also knew that in the grand scheme of things, that really what mattered more was getting on to the next experiment. And Amazon are the prime example of this. The Fire Phone, they have a graveyard of failed experiments, but then they have AWS. And it's 1 in 20, and you don't know when it's coming, like a slot machine. So it's really getting through 20. The son knew we needed to get on to the next experiment. If that experiment had failed, the next day we're on to the next experiment. And then he's going to conduct 20 experiments in the 9 months that the dad is deliberating one experiment. It was the rate of experimentation. And I just watched him wipe the floor with his father. And people that know me will know who I'm talking about. Wipe the floor with his father because of speed of experimentation. So I think about that a lot now. Get all of the things out of your way that are slowing your rate of experimentation and measure it. And the Kaizen philosophy, which I write about at great length in my book, is a prime example of this. Which shows it's all about empowering the people at all levels. And innovation isn't the job of the C-suite. Empower the people on the production line, incentivize them and measure the amount of experiments they're conducting. And then in the case of Toyota, who are still leading the world in auto production, you'll get 100,000 times more ideas from all levels of your company than your Western counterparts, which will drive efficiencies, drive profits up, drive costs down, reduce the amount of absenteeism, defects in the cars and everything else. And with the Kaizen philosophy in particular, which is this idea that everybody at all levels in the organization is responsible for innovation. And it's a flatter organization where you just have 3 levels, where you have like management, team leader, and then leader. They've proven, because they've taken over other companies like GM back in 1970. They took over GM, installed their culture, and a factory in America that had 12 defects per vehicle, had 20% absenteeism rates, had a backlog of 5,000 grievances from their employees, became GM's best production facility in the world with the same workforce. With the same people. They put in a firing freeze, and it was just culture. They went from being the worst GM plant in the world to being the best GM plant in the world with a change of culture, which was centered on empowerment, removing levels of bureaucracy, giving people the knowledge that they needed, and listening to people as well.
Here's what I've learned sitting with you. And I find this last bit absolutely magical, which is that everything about you is a work in progress. And what I mean by that is you apply the same philosophies to yourself as you do to your businesses, which is constant improvement, constant self-evaluation, constantly looking for something new. And the reason being is when it works, there's little glimmers, because they're glimmers, because you get a little break to see it work and then you're back in it. That those little glimmers feel like when you're in the backyard, in the garden, with your brothers, with the sun shining, and it's just effortless. And the family is functional, and the constant improvement, the constantly working on it is for these glimmers of magic, And the motivation is the sun on your back with your friends. And you've spoken about this, which is the way you describe that experience in the garden with your family is the same way you described when I asked you to give me a business example, that if every day was like this, you'd be the happiest person alive of every project. And you described Diary of a CEO. And it sounded very much the way you described your except your brothers were replaced by your team, and the sunshine was replaced by sort of that you're making an impact. And even though everybody's working really hard, and even though you're running around and everybody's sweating, there's this joy and effortlessness that comes from it. And at the end of the day, it's about family, right? It's about creating that sense of family and people who share in the joy. And this is what I find absolutely magical about you, which is you're very unselfish about your success. You want to bring as many people, you want to bring the team with you.
The Drivers is a great example where at the end of last year, we show everyone the bank account in the team. So everyone gets to see how the money's being spent. And then at the end of the year, we take, last year, I think it was 20% of what's in the bank account and give it to the team. So it's a new way to build a company. But again, it goes back to this thing of trying to go for 10 years where you've got someone who maybe got a size, there's people in the team whose size of bonus at Christmas was the same size as their salary, and they're 21. And handing over that check in my house, where we all met, every single member of the team, including Sophie here, who got enough to pay off her mortgage at Christmas, she said, was the best day of my career. You know, it was genuinely the best day of my career, being able to do that, build a company where there's not like these other shareholders, and being able to pay off Sophie's mortgage with a Christmas gift that she wasn't expecting. That's, you know,
that's the sunshine.
That's the sunshine. Yeah, it is. We do run like a family. I mean, like,
it's the pursuit of sunshine.
Yeah,
I think that's what you do.
Yeah, I still think I'm trying to figure out why I do what I do. You know, the pursuit of sunshine is a nice way to sum it up. And I think about it a lot. I just think more broadly about humans, why we struggle, like why we need to climb and why we need to achieve. And
human beings are dopamine-driven animals, right? For good reason, which is find food, find shelter, find protection. You know, here I found some food, got it, dopamine, do it again. But that's only one half of how human beings work. But the problem is that it's a very tangible thing. Dopamine is produced by tangible outcome, a metric that I can count, food that I can eat, my keys that I lost now that I've now found. Like, here they are. That's dopamine. You know, like I hit 3 sevens on the slot machine. You have to be able to see it. You know, that's how you get it. And we're very, very tangibly driven animals. Animals is a very powerful motivator, but it doesn't produce feelings of joy, safety, love, which are the other flip side. And that's all of that slow building chemical stuff of serotonin and oxytocin. And the hard work of being human is maintaining the balance. And I think this is so funny because we're animals, like all animals in Mother Nature. Cats don't have to work very hard at being cats. They're cats. But humans have to work really hard at being good at being human. And we can screw it up so badly. And remember, we're very old machines. We're a very legacy machine, tens of thousands of years old, operating in a world that our bodies and our systems were not designed for. And perhaps 50,000 years ago, we didn't have to think about how to be a good human being. It probably was organized to work. But in this modern day and age, we have to, because there's so many things that will break the machine. Like, think about it. In the West, because there's so much abundance, you know, we just go to the supermarket, you know, like we actually have to think about nutrition. Like, we have to think about what we should eat and how we should eat. That 50,000 years ago, that never happened. You eat whatever you found. And by the way, it was fine, you know? It's because everything around us has hijacked and broken the human being. But I just get a kick out of the fact that it's so hard to be a good human. And this idea of constant improvement for you is very, very balanced on working very, very hard to be a good human being, be kind to those around you, bring those around you on the journey with you, share the sunshine with the brothers. The sunshine is paying off the mortgage. I just love that you do it. I think a lot of people talk about it. And we live in a world where, you know, the hard-nosed business people scoff at the people who talk about kindness and generosity as business philosophies. And then you have the other side of the sort of like the universe will provide that scoff at people who are driven by metrics. And the answer is you're both right and you're both wrong. It's both. It's both. And I do honestly believe, you know, where so many CEOs look like Jack Welch today, which I think is abhorrent, I'm bullish that in 10 or 20 years that the majority of CEOs will look and act like you. And when we talk about mental fitness and people struggles with mental fitness, I think the antidote isn't yoga. It's working for people, with people who care about you and want to see you succeed and succeed together. You know, the business is the modern tribe.
Yeah, it's exactly that.
And the tribal leaders have a responsibility to make sure that the tribe survives bad weather, you know, drought, you know, an attack from another tribe, an attack from a wild animal. And it is very tribal. I don't think somebody older than you would have figured this out. And I hope that you inspire people who are younger than you on how to do this right. I want everybody to read all your books. I want everybody to listen to your podcast. You know, when I think about the diary of a CEO, it's not the CEO part that matters. It's the diary part that matters. It's the self-reflection. It's the recording. It's the gratitude.
It's exactly why I chose the name, which is you don't often get to see into the diary of a CEO.
No.
They tend to keep it private. So it almost felt like a bit of a juxtaposition, something so secretive and elusive and somewhat guarded, and then the diary, which is vulnerable and open, and the antithesis of that. And then that's really what I'm trying to do, is trying to get people to open their diary and to share the wisdom, the honesty and the vulnerability that exists within it. So
you're good at getting other people to open up their diaries, and you do it by demonstrating your willingness to open up yours.
That is true.
Just as you said, you'll stay up till 1 o'clock in the morning with your team and not ask them to do anything that you wouldn't do. You're not asking anybody else to open up and answer questions that you wouldn't answer.
They wouldn't.
They wouldn't.
You know, when we first met, if you got the impression that I was like threatening or I was unwilling to be equally open with you, I don't think we would have had the conversations that we had. When I say focus, consistency, and showing up every day and trying to find a 1% gain, this is why. And this is also why we're not going to launch the podcast network, which we spent 12 months and I extended an offer to one of the biggest CEOs in the media world. And then I sat down with my team and I said to them, and I talk about this idea of this pre-mortem analysis. I said to my team the day before I was going to sign off this job offer for this guy to quit his job at this big company and come and join us to launch a big global podcasting network with all the skills and knowledge we have. I said, why will this fail? Question I haven't asked a lot in my career. And there was this pause amongst my team. And then minutes later, boom, reason 1, reason 2, reason 3, focus. We can't, if we have talent or celebrities, what if they leave? We'll lose sight. We don't have enough resources to run multiple podcasts. We'll lose sight. All of these reasons came out. And I made the decision after 12 months of work and spending hundreds of thousands of pounds to not pursue it and to go back to focus. And
I think this is something that people don't understand, which is the momentum of a decision. Like, just because we spent time and energy doesn't mean we should do it. And there's this, I think there's a lot of leaders who are plagued by this, which is we have to do it. Why do we have to do it? Because look how much time and money we've invested, But
there's a psychological bias, which I read about, where they basically got a group of people. It's Elliot Aronson, the psychologist, the American psychologist, one of my favorite. They got a group of people and they put them into a very boring book club. Very, very boring. Everyone in there was purposefully, intentionally dull. And then they asked them how good the book club was. And they all gave a score. So these people that were put into there. Then they got another group of people and they made them go through a rigorous testing process and surveys to get into the book club. The people that had done the rigorous testing and surveys and applications to get into the book club, even though it was dull and boring, reported that the book club was amazing and was much better than the people that hadn't fought to get in there. And it speaks to this kind of like sunk cost idea that leaders have, where just because we've worked hard on something, they trick themselves into believing that it is good. And then it must be good. It's a psychological bias. And that's what we had done. We'd spent a year working on something, so no one had stopped to pause and ask ourselves why this is a really bad idea. We'd invested so much, too much.
A friend of mine, he invited me to sit in on his company All Hands, which he does, I think, like twice a year. And they have this rigorous process where they go through everything. And it was amazing because I just sat back. And there's something that they do that I absolutely love, which is when they invest in a company, they do an internal analysis, which is what are the 3 reasons we shouldn't invest?
Yeah.
Right? But he does it on his own company too. He asks his own team, what are the 3 reasons someone shouldn't invest in us? Right?
Interesting.
And it doesn't matter what's on the list. What matters is when they do it again next time, if the same things are still on the list.
Why? And I think it's important to say why this is so important, because what it does is it changes my perspective. It takes me away from the painting. Sometimes you're too close to the painting that you can't see the picture. It takes me away from the painting and puts me in another perspective where I can look at myself.
Yeah.
Just that simple question. And immediately when you said that, I did that with my company Flight Story, my marketing business. I thought, what was the reason why someone shouldn't invest in it? And the answer came to mind.
Yeah. Well, he does 3. And again, there's not a problem. None of those are a problem. The problem is if one of them continues to be on the list, that means you haven't addressed it. Because what it does is it reveals the things that need to be fixed or addressed. So address them. There's always going to be reasons why people shouldn't invest in you. And I know we've done this analysis on ourselves. And the frustration is we had one thing that kept showing up on the list each time we did. And we're like, okay, we have a serious problem here that this thing is always on the list, And so that's our focus is to address that thing. But I love that test. I love that test, which is the 3 reasons not to do something, because
So
I don't think we do that. I think we talk about all the upside, and you and I've talked about this before, which is the cost of things, and we don't mean money, which is everything in the world comes at a cost. There's a cost for the money you make. There's a cost for your relationships, and it's not for us to weigh whether the cost is worth it. Like if somebody thinks it's worth being driven by the size of your yacht and the size of your plane and the size of your house and the number of Lamborghinis you have front, and if the cost is I am lonely, I have no relationships, all of my friendships are deal friendships, they're all transactional friendships. If that cost is worth it, then have at it. Like who am I to tell you the life that you should or shouldn't live, right? But don't wake up one morning and be surprised that you're lonely and have no friends. You knew that going in, and you decided that was worth it. Mm-hmm. Now, if you want to make a change, fine, then be open about it. Mm-hmm. I thought it was worth it. I realized I was wrong. It wasn't worth it. And so I'm a great believer in evaluating the cost of things all the time and asking myself, was the cost worth it? And so you've made sacrifices in your life for the life you lead. I've made sacrifices in my life for the life that I lead and the way I choose to build my movement and spread my message. And if you ask me, was the cost worth it? And it came at great personal cost of personal life and social life, relationships. And the answer is yes. Yes, it was worth it. Because the thing that I care about, I was willing to pay that. And other people weren't willing to pay that, but I was. And again, it's not judgmental or it is all subjective to each individual.
And their North Star.
And it's a North Star. But the question, but you have to be open and honest with yourself about what is the cost of this decision that I'm making. One of my favorite decision-making criteria, before I make a decision, and this is stupid little stuff even sometimes, it's interpersonal stuff sometimes, not just big business decisions. Sometimes it's mundane little stuff. I'll always ask myself, what good will come of this decision? And if no good comes of this decision, then why are you making this decision? And sometimes, it's like people who say, like, well, what good will come of this decision? It's the principle, and they need to know the principle. I'm like, no, but what good will come of this decision? Like sometimes the best decision to make is nothing. It's the decision of indecision or the decision of no decision. But I want to make sure that good comes from my decisions.
Yeah.
And again, so if giving somebody feedback, right? Like sometimes I want to give people feedback because I really genuinely care about them and I want them to grow. And we've all interacted with people who I'll give you a real life example. Early in my career, and I was just starting with Start With Why. There was no book, no TED Talk. Nobody knew anything about me or my work, anything like that. And I was giving a presentation to a big conference of entrepreneurs, business people, 1,000 people or something. It was a big deal for me. It's very exciting. I got done giving the Start With Why speech, and the very first comment, a guy raises his hand, and he says, "Have you ever led a $1 billion company?" I said, "No." He said, "Have you ever led a significant sized team?" I said, "No." He goes, "Well, I think you're naive. I think that nothing that you've talked about today is based in reality. And I don't think your work is realistic in the real world." And I said, "So don't do it." Next question, please. Right? And the point is like, what good will come of me defending my ideas and preaching to him? He's not open to an alternative way of thinking. And I'm cool with that. My job is not to fight with you and be the entertainment for the room for the day. Like, right? They're like, no good will come from me picking this fight, taking the bait.
It goes back to what I said at the start about the quitting framework.
Yeah.
Which is at some point you go, the rewards on offer here are not worth.
But I think quitting is an underappreciated topic. I think that like you must never quit. It's like you have to have grit. I'm like, that's really bad advice. But at the same time, you should, you just quitting easily is also bad advice. And so the question, and I grapple with the same thing, is usually like, well, when do you quit and when do you not quit?
I literally wrote a framework for this to help me understand in hindsight why I quit sometimes and why I don't. And it kind of goes how I said, where are you thinking about quitting? There's kind of a flow chart where on the left-hand side, you're thinking about quitting because it's hard. Okay, so is the hardship worth the effort? And these are all broad subjective things, but you have to separate something being hard from something, in my words, from sucking. Sucking is like that misery. It's that like kind of the toxic miserableness that I experienced in my companies, or that people experience at work, or they experience in a relationship. Hardship is like the physical hardship. It's not, you know what I mean? And that's the distinction that I'm trying to make.
I have an example that I think might make tangible what you're trying to say, which is Leaders Eat Last was the most difficult thing I've ever written, the most difficult thing I've ever done. Writing that book was excruciating and impossible. And the reason was it was like a Pandora's box, which every single chapter could have been a book unto itself. Mm-hmm. And there was so much, like, Start With Why was something like 68,000 words, something like that. And when I sat down to write Leaders Eat Last, I wrote 150,000 words, and I thought I was just getting started. Like, it just was never ending. And I couldn't organize the information. And I couldn't understand when I got started, like, why had none of the social scientists that I was interviewing, how come none of them has ever taken the biology of human decision-making, oxytocin and serotonin, how come none of them have ever taken these chemicals and overlaid them with corporate culture and written about it? It was because it was absolutely impossible to organize. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't figure it out. And the stress was extraordinary. I lost 2 relationships writing that book because I was not in my best mind. It was awful. And so at some point I quit. And I realized it beat me. It won. I can't do it. And I remember I went for a walk. I was living in New York City. And the reason, it was about 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. And I went for a walk. And I was walking to plan my exit. I went to plan the checklist of quitting. So I would have to call the publisher and say, I can't do it, which is technically a breach of contract, which means I'd have to give my advance back. Okay, that's going to suck, but okay. I'd have to tell all the people who supported me and were friends that I can't do it, and I'd be humiliated, but I'll get over it, and so will they. I'd have to tell the people who were big fans of my first book, that second book that I told you is coming, it's not coming. They'll be disappointed. I'll be humiliated. They'll get over it. I'll get over it. Like literally going through the emotional and practical checklist of quitting. Going through all the steps that I had to do. And for some reason, I don't know why, I called a friend of mine who at the time was in the Air Force Special Forces, and I called him up, and I don't even think I said hello when he picked up the phone. He was active duty at the time. And I said, what do you do when you can't complete the mission? And as is his nature, he started telling me a story. He said, he used to be a helicopter pilot. He said they were assigned to go on this mission in Afghanistan, and all the intelligence said that it was a suicide mission. And not a suicide mission like kill Hitler and you're all going to die. It was like, you're all going to die and the mission will fail. Like it's just a worthless loss of life, right? And as they were preparing for this mission, they all knew that that's what the intelligence was, that this was literally a pointless mission. And they were prepping their helicopter, and his wingman turned to him. They got wives, they've got kids. His wingman turns to him and says, what do we do? Like, do we refuse to go? Like, what do we do? And my friend said to him, no, this is what we signed up for. We go. Obviously, cooler heads prevailed and the mission was scrapped before they left. And then he tells me the story, and then he says to me, is this book more or less powerful than the first book you wrote? And I said, it's having a greater impact on my life, just in the research, than the first book. He goes, okay, I'll tell you a funny story. He says, before I met you, I was completely disillusioned with the military. I didn't know what kind of leader I could be. And I read this kooky little book that somebody gave me called Start With Why, and it completely re-inspired me. And I can tell you the reason I'm still here and loving my job is because of that book. And if you're telling me that this thing that you're working on is more powerful than the first book, then you have to write this book. He says, this is what you signed up for, you have no choice. Now, he didn't mean, this is what you signed up for, you have no choice. What he meant was, this is what you signed up for, you have no choice, and I will be there with you every step of the way. Just like that was the underlying message to his wingman. I'm going to go with you. We're going to die together. I literally turned around, went back to my apartment, and finished writing that book. Obviously not that night. Mm-hmm. And the pain was excruciating, but I realized that the stakes were worth it. And that's what you mean by hardship versus sucking. Yeah. Like, it was unbelievably hard, but it didn't suck. Yeah. And it did have health consequences, and it made me stressed out of my mind. Sleeping became difficult.
And there was a moment where you weren't sure whether it was hard and worth it.
There was a point where I couldn't understand if it sucked or if it was hard.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why I think, to go back, and I sort of pushed you a little bit before, which is I'm not always sure that we by ourselves can distinguish, because hardship and sucking often feel the same. Sleepless nights, stressed out of my mind, I'm short-tempered, I'm losing relationships, my friends fucking hate me, And I think it sometimes takes calling one of those friends who loves you and asking them, why am I doing this? And I loved the question that I asked him, how do you know, how do you know when to quit the mission? And his answer was basically, if it's worth it to other people and you signed up for a life of service, you have no choice. But the most important thing was I felt alone prior to that, and I never felt alone after. So it still was awful, except I felt hard and supported versus hard and alone. And so I think not quitting, the decision to not quit, the check is, will somebody support me? And if other people think it's not worth it, then they're not going to support me. Especially if it's a selfish pursuit, right? I'm going to make $1 million. Nobody gives a shit about you and your financial ambitions. Nobody's going to sweat with you for that, because that's just for your benefit. Mm-hmm. And well, the funny thing is, I didn't hate every second, because there were epiphanies that were magical. But there were 2 years of my life that were awful, and it was 100% worth it.
And that's a situation where you don't quit.
That's the situation where you don't quit.
I told you about my discipline equation, didn't I?
I don't remember. Remind me.
I think we talked about it on stage, where I was trying to figure out why some areas of my life I have high discipline in. And so the discipline equation that I came up with was, at the start of the equation, you have the why.
Oh, yes.
The reason for doing it. Yes. So you just gave a list of whys there. Yeah. Plus the psychological enjoyment you get from the pursuit itself. Yeah. Minus the psychological disengagement or unenjoyment that you get from the pursuit. Yeah. And trying to make sure, and even in the case of writing that book you said, like it was incredibly unengaging and unenjoyable. So that part of the equation rose up. The enjoyment part rose down, but the bit that you managed to get back up again was the why part of the equation. Yeah. So you go, like, if you said like why plus enjoyment plus, I don't know, friction. Yeah. I constantly think about ways and areas of my life that I can remind myself of why I'm doing this thing. I can make the pursuit of the thing as enjoyable and frictionless as possible. And I can limit the discomfort and friction of the pursuit of the thing. So DJing is a good example. Really, really love music, want to DJ. I'm clear on that. I have to remind myself by putting my DJing decks as the wallpaper on my iPhone. The process of actually practicing and doing DJing is therapy. It's therapeutic, playing the music I love. So it's a really enjoyable pursuit. Now, the friction is time and setting up the DJ equipment and the nerves you get when you walk out on stage. That's all friction. How do I limit? And that's where I think I've come to learn in my life. The things I'm disciplined on are when the why and the pursuit are there and the friction is low.
The annoying thing about talking to you is I could talk to you forever.
Yeah.
And there's a point at which I think we have to pull the ripcord.
Yeah.
This might be that time. I'm going to go back to what I said before. I think you are representative of CEO 2.0 for a modern era. And I tell you this not to blow smoke up your ass. I tell you this because I think the stakes are high. And I think you're reinventing what leading a company looks like that flies in the face of what too many leaders and future leaders have been told or are being told. And you lead by example, and you are an example of what leadership should look like. And if you get distracted by temptation, don't fuck it up, because the stakes are high. It's the future of business and all the people who work in those businesses. And there's this rise of populism, and there's this rise of anti-authority and anti-leadership in government or in business. And people are cynical, and rightfully so. And I think that leaders like you are the antidote. I honestly believe it. I think if you get this wrong, I think the social ripples are significant. You and I both meet a lot of people. Not a lot of them lead like you do. I'm a preacher. Like, I talk about ideas, I share ideas, I write about ideas. I'm a proselytizer, I'm a preacher. Like I'm preaching what things could look like and offering some tools about how to get there. But you're doing the things. And, the fact that you would say to me that one of my books had such a profound impact that you changed the way you led your business is the reason why you have to keep doing it, because you're a tangible representation of a philosophical idea that I talk about.
I really appreciate that. I find it really difficult to take compliments.
Just say thank you.
But I know, I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate that. And I appreciate all the wonderful things you've done for me. I mean, the first time you came on the podcast, there's a part of me that still freaks out about the fact that you even said yes to coming on. No, I'm being honest, of course, because you're someone that I've been reading about, and your books have helped me in such a profound way that to have those initial conversations and our friendship with you is something I hold and I cherish greatly. Yeah, and everything you've said about the responsibility part, I really hope that I can continue to be honest with myself.
Yeah.
That's the thing I hope I can do, and I hope I can go further in that direction, because there's a lot of people listening now, so I hope that I can continue to be honest and open. And in doing so, we create these environments where it brings value to people. So that's my objective. That's the responsibility that I spoke about with Rebecca in the things that keep me up at night and all of those things. It's that sense of like, I have a chance to do some good stuff. So I'm going to do my best to continue.
This is what you signed up for. You have no choice. And I will be with you every step of the way.
Thank you.